So a bit about me. Hi, my name is Vipul, and I work at Geeky Ants. Ignore the. Don't tell my boss my designation. So in terms of technical domains, my personal interests are in developer experience and tooling, and this talk is also slightly related to that. If you guys have watched SpongeBob SquarePants ever, if you know then you know the character Patrick, right? So I really like him. He, I think, is my spirit animal. And also, I really like sunrises because they always remind me it's time to sleep. So yeah, I really like sunrises. Cool. So what is feature hacking, anyways, right? So in the context of this talk, particularly, we'll take a system that we really like and is a broad spectrum with different features, right? And then what we'll try to do is we'll take out the interesting parts and try to recreate the core functionality in a sense that we understand. Okay, so the major thing that we do feature hacking for is to reliably guess or take educated guesses on how one must have implemented the whole project, right? But the core idea here is that you are not really sure, like you don't know what they used. There is no way for you to actually look at their code base. Okay, so that's how we do it. So we do feature hacking to make educated guesses on how they might have built the core product. All right, so what are we hacking today? So drum rolls, and it's UI DevTools from Sid. Okay, so let's this is a small gif, and if Sid is around, he'll really like this talk, I guess. So uh, let's explore UI DevTools a bit. Okay, so this is a small gif, and if Sid is around, he'll really like this talk, I guess. So let's explore UI DevTools a bit. Okay, come on. Cool. All right. So I'm going to show you a few cool things before we actually dive into the topic. Okay. So if you wait for a bit, this text is supposed to make like real things. So see, it makes like color change and stuff. So I just discovered this yesterday when I was looking at it for another time. And also like some like a small thing I'll show you. Okay. So if you go here, the cursor becomes a rock sign, which was like pretty hilarious to me when I saw it yesterday. So it has like these small bits all across the platform, and like you move and you will find more. So let's go to the part that really got me interested. Okay. So let's look at this. I'll open this in a new tab so that it becomes big and we can see it. All right. So if you look at here, just looking at the platform, this is the demo that we are going to use. So what he's doing is he has a component, and this looks like simple JSX, right? Doing some weird magic I don't understand at all. He is able to change the code in the browser, and the code directly updates in the code that he's written. Okay. Now, when I saw this for the first time, my emotions were similar to this. So I was looking at my screen, and then my brain blew up, and the only question I had was how. And then I asked just three more times. So I was like, how? And then I was like, how? And finally, also, and how. So I had no clue how he built it, right? And it was fascinating to me how could he achieve something like that. So today we are going to try and make educated guesses about this product. Okay. But first, you've been overwhelmed. It's time to breathe. So everyone take a deep breath. Let's move forward. All right. So this is my personal favorite topic, by the way, on this whole talk. Okay. So this is basically a comparison on if you're trying to build a product or if you're trying to build a feature, okay, or feature hacking a product. So if you're building a product, you have actual users and stuff, right? And they report bugs and stuff. So you have to fix them because maybe they're paying you or maybe you want to make your product successful. If you're feature hacking, it's just a toy, right? You can play around with as much as you want. When you're bored, just leave it. When you're building a product, it's built for a wider audience. All right. So you have to cater to a lot of different people and a lot of different use cases. Right? If you're hacking a feature, you're doing it so that you can feel good about yourself. You can feel smart, like, okay, I did something smart. And of course, Twitter. Like you're supposed to post it on Twitter, and that's why you're doing. We all know that. No shame in that. You know, I know, we all do that for that. Cool. So, right. And also, if you're building a product, right, building a product comes with a lot of edge case handling and also corner cases that you have to deal with. Right. My favorite part about feature hacking is if you have a bug, right, that keeps bothering you, just stop producing it. You are the sole user, right? Write down the steps that replicate this and stop using that whole process. Try a different workflow. All right. So cool. Let's hack. All right. So if I go to my browser real quick, right? So first of all, to hack something, you'll have to go to hackertyper.net, right? And then you can start hacking. So let's hack a bit. All right. This is pretty cool. I don't understand one single line of this. Looks like PHP or what? All right, enough. Cool. Now let's go to NSA's website. Going to hack NSA, guys. Right. So you go to console. I'm going to say document. Right. So document dot body. This is going to be cool. Okay. No, not text. I want HTML. Oh no. Okay, cool. Great. So all the data is gone. Let's write something now. Yo. Pretty cool, right? We just hacked NSA. Guys, all right, fine. No more bad jokes. Let's go back to the. All right, cool. So we just hacked NSA, and since we just hacked NSA, we have a couple of things we need to do. So the important pointers, okay. First of all, let's add a new section on your resume and just mark that you had hacked NSA at one point of time, and you get bragging rights. Then you'll have to post a screenshot on Twitter to make it like legit, because then your recruiter will ask you what's the proof, and then you can show them the Twitter screenshot, and then you'll be good. Then go to LinkedIn, add the info section in your job section, and find a job that pays you a lot of money. Right. So these are the steps anybody can do. All right. But the next step, it's just for me. You guys shouldn't try this at home. Like, this is a proper disclaimer. Don't try this at home at all. So we try to hack Tesla, okay? Because we want to get Elon Musk's attention and hope one day he'll adopt this. Now, this is just for me. Don't do it at home. This can be really risky. All right. No more bad jokes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Fine. God, why are you behaving like you paid for this or something? Did you pay for this? But wait, the important question is, how do you have money and stuff? Didn't you invest all your money in crypto, and are you part of the being broke club? Did you not? Did you guys keep your money and not invest it in crypto? I don't like you guys anymore. No more jokes for you. I'm just kidding. Let me show you something cool. All right. So if we go to my browser and we close all this nonsense that we've been doing, and if we go to my local host and go to my port 5000, I'm going to build the DevTools that said build, okay? And we are going to do it feature by feature. So let's go to step 0. And in step 0, we create a right navigation. Cool. We got a navigation on the right. This is pretty nice, right? We're making progress. We've already got the right navigation. What else would one want? Maybe add a few fields also. Text, color, nice. We're making good progress here. I'm not sure if you guys appreciate this enough, but we are making some progress here. Let's go to step 2 and actually make some progress here. So what I've done at this point of time is, and we'll see it in code, the browser first, and then we'll dive into the code and understand this. So if I click here, right, my fields on the right get populated automatically, and I can toggle between these as many times as I want, right? And appropriate things get filled up. So let's look at the code now and try to understand what's going on. All right. So we'll go to step 0, then step 1, step 2, and build. So each step builds on top of the other one. Okay. So that's why we are going to dive into atomic units and only understand the bits that I change in each step. Okay. So here I just have a plain simple HTML5 document, right? It has a CSS file which is actually causing the sidebar to appear. So let's just look at that quickly. So just my box model, then position absolute slide, and then for my slides for my fields. Okay. So that's what it is. Now, if I go to step 1, that's the same model. I've just added some inline styles to some elements, right? So given them colors, right? and then added these fields. So these two form fields I've added. All right, that's how I started. I legit started like this. Okay, then I went to step 2, and then I thought, you are really lazy, right? There is no way you are going to write event listeners for every single thing. So gave my container an ID, and I bound my click listener on the main container, right? So all the elements that are inside my main container, whenever they get clicked on, single event fires, right? So that's associated on my main element. Good. Now we'll talk about this why it's needed, but just forget this mentally for a bit, right? Then to find the appropriate element, we go to the event object and we get the target element, right? Then we create two functions. Okay, so one is for the color change listener and the other one is for the inner text change listener. All right, and yeah, the cat's out of the box, it's changing the inner text. So that's it, right? So we write those two listeners, right? And then what we do is we have IDs for these inputs as well, right? So ID here and ID here. All right, and then we tell them, okay, so the values are the values that are currently on the side object and others uh, on the element, and we assign the values there, right? And then we add these cliff listeners. Cool. So now let's look at why do we need to remove these, right? So let's go back to the code and let's see, right? So if I refresh this, right, nothing shows up. Cool. When I click this for the first time, few, two event listeners were assigned on these, right? Now, if I click again, those event listeners are still here in some background somewhere trying to do their job, right? But we've assigned two other listeners, right? So if I try to change this property now, say I make it purple, right? And if I change this color, so if I say hello world, right? And if I go back here and I say hello world, right? Currently it's changing the appropriate properties. Why? Because I've remove the listeners when I start this call again. If I remove this, what it'll do is it'll keep the listeners around. So I clicked on the first one, clicked on the second one, trying to change it. So it changes for both of them, right? Because the listeners for both of them still exist, right? So what I have to do is I have to remove that listener once I'm done. All right. So this is just some housekeeping stuff I'm doing. Okay. Now let's go to the interesting bits. All right. And for this, what I'll do is I'll make my code window. So what I'll do is I'll extract this out, and then what I will say is make them come side by side. Right? So why don't you go to the right? All right. And so browser isn't here, right? It's here, but it's in full screen. So let's make it go to the left or make it to the right or whatever. Cool. So we have the code on the right, and currently my hello world is purple and which is not reflected because I'm in step 2 and I forgot to go to step 3. All right, cool. So here my current h1 element has a color purple and the inner HTML text is hello world. Right? Let's do something. Let's click on hello world. Right? I don't like purple, I like red. Right? Did you notice that I said red here and my code updated appropriately, right? Let's try to do it again. Maybe I like orange now. You see that? You catch that? Maybe try to change the text as well. Right? I spelled it all wrong, but you might get the sense of it, right? So I am able to get the functionality right. Just don't know how it's working, right? This is, for me, this was the point when I said, okay, I've replicated what Sid didn't do it, but in a fun environment, right? In an environment where I was able to directly update my code, the source of truth of my application from my browser. Right? That's what I wanted to do. So let's look at some details, like how this works, right? So first of all, what I did is, so a little bit of background, right? We built it in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Now let's start making educated guesses about Sid's product. Okay? So first of all, what blew my mind initially was I thought that since he's using JSX, right, changing an appropriate value in JSX will mean that for one, he has to transpile his code into HTML JavaScript, right? Then he'll have to update it, make it go a round way again, and then convert the new thing into JSX and replace it there, right? So that was in my initial thought, but we are not doing anything like that in our application. How is that possible, right? So that's possible because we are using what one might call the assembly of the browser already. Why the assembly of the browser? Because these are the languages that my browsers understand natively. What I'm using is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and my browser understands this natively. Apart from understanding these natively, it also thinks in these languages, right? When I make a DOM change, my DOM API is just a medium for me to interact with my HTML and CSS right in the browser via this language called JavaScript, which we love and do all the time, right? So my advantage in this feature hacking domain is that I'm speaking something my browser understands natively. And on top of understanding is natively, it also talks to the system in this particular language itself, right? Whenever I do some change in the DOM, it's reflected in terms of HTML and CSS or an extension of it at the most, right? And then all those APIs, the interaction that I do with that API, the interaction with that assembly language, right? The DOM API so-called is already provided to me, right? So if you think about this in terms of a parser or a transpiler or something like that, right? A browser is basically the best HTML, CSS, and JavaScript parser that was written, right? So your platform that you're using and we are using in this current scenario is actually a transpiler. We don't need an extra transpiler, compiler, and stuff like that. We don't need it because our platform does that inherently for us. And it's been under development from a long, long time. So it's the best that's out there, right? So we are going to abuse that in the sense that we are going to tell browser, hey, do one thing. I'm going to tell you to change a specific property. Go ahead, change that. Browser will go and change that for you. Cool. DOM interactions, we know them already. But the great part is the language we were supposed to write it in, the browser also writes in that language. And so I can do this clever. All right. So I can tell my DOM, hey DOM, can you give me access to your DOM element? I'll even say please if you do that. All right. And then we just take the whole inner HTML. Because my browser is my transpiler, my instructions are in an assembly first language. It's the core that's my browser speaks, right? I can simply say, whatever changes I've done till this point, just give me the whole HTML that you created for them. That's the beauty about this, right? And then I just write it to a simple localhost server. If we look at my server code, all right, I'm going to hide one line, and apart from that, so I'm going to hide this. And apart from that, if you look at it, it simply looks like Express, right? So I'm doing a bit of Node and a bit of Express. So let's go through line by line. So my port number, if this thing, just imagine this nav thing. Just imagine if it's I imported Express as nav. All right. For now, let's imagine like this, right? So if you have written Express ever in your life, this code seems really familiar, right? And then there is just simple write file server, which writes file to the code, right? Now this nav business here, it's a library that I wrote. So basically, what it is Tiny Express, which has no dependencies, right? So I didn't like Express back in a time because it had too many dependencies. So I wrote a Express like library sort of, and it's called nav. The I use it, don't use it, because since I wrote it, I can patch it at any point of time, and it's not ready for production, but it's on npm, so don't use it. But basically what it does is once you create the app, it mimics every single functionality that's there in Express but doesn't use any external dependencies. So yeah, that's what we are using here. All right, cool. So now since we understand what wizardry we are doing, let's go and take a look at our slides, right? Do we have anything extra? Uh, so was it good enough? For me, I was satisfied at this point of time, right? But one thing I was really curious about still is how Sid did it, right? Because he was doing that whole JSX to HTML transpilation, introducing a new abstraction layer in between. So what I did is I tweeted this to Sid. Okay, I took the screenshot. I tweeted because remember, whenever you do something cool, post it on Twitter. So I tweeted this to Sid, and he was really kind, and he let me look at his code base. So he added me as sponsor to his code base, right? And I was able to look at his code base. So what did I found? Okay, So before we look at SID's code, right, let's create some hypothesis of our own, because now the whole point of feature hacking is that we are going to make educated guesses, and let's start making those educated guesses now. So the first limitation that we have is that we completely disregarded the whole notion of modulation, right? Because how our system works is basically, if you do any changes in the styles property or anything like that, right, inside DOM, they are going to be added to the HTML style attribute, right, which defeats the whole purpose of modulation. And we don't really want to do that. I personally like modulation a lot. I don't know about you guys. If you don't, you're weird. But yeah, whatever. I'm not judging. Yeah. So we defeat the whole purpose of modulation, right? But Sid didn't. We could clearly see in his demo that there was a component that was in isolation, right? And the component was getting updated in isolation. So that was interesting. He didn't, we did. So how can we change that if we can, right? And secondly, the code patching that we are doing is extremely dumb, right? Unselective and uninteresting, really, if you think about it. What we are doing is we have written an echo server which just takes the code and puts it in a file, saves it, and the B does gets done with it, right? So nothing interesting about that. But I'm really curious how he might be doing this, right? And finally, can we make it do more, right? Okay, I am satisfied with what I've achieved something, but can we make it do more? So can we do make it do more? Yeah, we can actually. So first things we can solve about this is we can handle more properties. Okay. So how you go by that, doing that, right? So if you do window dot get computed styles for an element, you'll get all the CSS properties that are on that element. Currently, we were just supporting colors. Using this, you can support all the properties, right? So if you just on a select of element, as we saw, get all the properties, attach the listeners for that, create appropriate elements for those, then you can handle a lot of properties. You're getting closer. In our system is usable now, right? Now say, and also the thing with that using get computed styles is you can get element specific properties, right? So if you have a marquee tag that has a specific CSS property that say a paragraph doesn't or something like a image doesn't, right? So you get access to those. So these will be element specific, and the platform will be more catered, and it will start going on that journey of being a product slowly, right? Okay, so make it do more, right? Currently, we found a way to add more properties, but how do I like make this do even more? Okay, so one thing was we can explore different properties in sections, and that's all fine, right? Cool. So one thing was that Sid was able to give them property values they can choose from, right? So say if there was a property like display, right? So we know it's either going to be block, list, none, etc., etc., right? So could we make that thing come to our project, right? So listen, I'm lazy and I was not going to do it by hand. So I Googled and Googled and Googled, and then I found this interesting thread on Stack Overflow. So basically, so one thing was when I Googled it, right, I found interest in the thing I was doing and someone else was also doing at a point of time, right? So I found that okay, there is an interest for this. Cool. So I found this interesting thread, and it stated that so browsers don't expose these properties to us directly. I don't know why. If you ask me personally, I think they should, right? But they don't. They use them internally. But there was this interesting thing that existed once in time called Firebug, all right? And if you don't know Firebug, you just don't talk to me. But yeah, if you know that, and if you can do the manner of finding the appropriate repository Firebug lives in, then this guy who was really helpful wrote the exact file path. Okay, so he was like content Firebug lib.js. Go there, you'll find all the properties. But the fact is that they might be old because the CSS specs changes, right? So you will get a starter and a great starter because Firebug used to use it, right? And then you can add more properties. So if you are going to do that manner, then I'll save you some time. All right. Now let's look at the original code, and we are done because I'm not going to show you the original code, not at all. Cool. So what did we learn from actually looking at Sid's code, right? So one thing that I'm going to clearly tell is I didn't look at his code extensively. I looked at in brief. I looked at the points I was interested for. I looked at other things that I was really curious for, not for like finding all the intricate details about that. So let's look at my perspective and my hypothesis if they came true or not, right? So first of all, I found Sid's like code really like cognitively pleasing. It was just structured well. I really liked it. And big shout out to Sid for like letting me look at his code. Correct. So secondly, I found that he's using this package called JS CodeShift, right? It's a library that Facebook wrote some back time back. I don't know when. I didn't actually check. I should have, but I didn't because I'm busy. Yeah. So basically, they're using this thing called JS CodeShift, all right? And JS CodeShift is basically doing the whole heavy lifting of changing the code, all right? But that comes with some other things, right? So it has to be told that okay, the products, the things that you're supposed to look for start from this line to this line, and there are some meta information that it also needs. So one thing that I personally learned was I found out a new library that I might use in my future sometime. So that was great. And then I also found out that he was not personally handling this. He was deferring that to a whole new library, which was cool. He was focusing on a different problem at all, right? Cool. So then the React component, right? So we saw that he uses this particular dev tools component that you have to wrap your whole components in. If you didn't, if you go to the platform, you will see, right? So I was really curious why they'll have to do that, right? And I found this part very clever and extremely smart, right? So we just heard, right, that JS Code Shift needs some meta information, right? So what he does is basically he uses that component as markers. Okay, so everything inside that is a part of DevTools now. Okay, and the sidebar, which is fine, but basically the interesting part is he uses that as markers, and he has a Babel plugin which basically transpiles that code and adds meta information about line numbers and stuff to the whole code, that's the subtree that's inside there, right? So that JS code shift could smartly change those things when they are changed automatically, right? So this was the part that I found really clever because he was using that component for that sort of transformation. It was really cool. So, but at the end of the day, the thing is the browsers don't understand JSX natively, right? They don't. It's just a fact, right? And that's why he's using Tailwind. Right? So the product is called Tailwind DevTools, right? Because if you go and do the thing that we did with inner text, that's not really possible, right? Because with JSX, inside an element, there could be any number of elements, right? But in our system, since we are using HTML, if there is a subtree in a tree, then we can reliably change it because we are not changing it at all. We are just handing that whole business to, say, the browser, right? And the browser does it on its own. So we are not touching that business at all, right? So that's why he uses Tailwind. And with Tailwind, the thing is that you're only changing property values of a single prop, which is called class name, right? So that's why he has a reliable solution because he only has to change values of a single prop, which is class name. And Tailwind being a utility first library fits right into this picture, right? So these two things work like in a very tightly coupled way, but they work so nicely that you don't even notice that. You see all the changes happening in the code as well, but all the changes that are happening in the class names, and the only thing that is actually changing is the class name property, right? So that was really interesting when I found it, right? But we are using HTML, right? And using HTML has its own perks, right? It has its disadvantages for sure, but it also has its own perks, right? So let's look at another example I created, right? So what we'll do is I'll go back, alright, and I go to step 4. Okay. Now don't need this because all the interesting parts are done. So I added this I'm feeling lucky button. Alright. So what I'll do is I'll add a paragraph tag. Okay. And if I press enter, what I'll do is if I go here, inspect in my body, in my main element, I was able to create an arbitrary element. Alright. This is the sidebar. Sorry. I was able to create a new HTML element. That's not possible with JSX at all because of the abstraction that we created, right? And the funny part is it's not limited, right? So I added a Easter egg. If you type div and press enter, right, it adds my favorite tag in the DOM, and it does this. So it creates a bouncing tag, and this is pure HTML, and this is done by my favorite tag, and it's MarkU. So if you guys don't know this, you are not cool. So yeah, whatever. Cool. So, all right. So this is it, right? So the extension that HTML gives us using the so-called assembly of the browser, right? You can do random extensions to your platform, right? With SID solution, we saw how limiting it was because the JSX2 whole HTML transpilation took a whole lot of abstraction out of it, right? And then adding these random nodes and to converting them to valid JSX will be a bit of a pain, right? And then you'll have to do a lot of extra manual. But in our case, this comes naturally because we are using the core abstraction that the browser speaks. The whole core idea for this to succeed is that the browser speaks HTML and it also thinks in HTML, right? And that's how we can do this stuff, right? So using HTML has its own perks, all right? So one is we can do extend our original solution, but also deviate from the product that we were initially feature hacking already. Because the language that we are speaking and the browser speaks has some direct to one-to-one mapping, right? So we can do arbitrary extensions to our platform, right? And since, as I said, we are talking in the so-called assembly of the browser, we can do random extensions, right? And this was just one example. You could do any amount of things, right? You could do a fancy, say, insert this on top of this, insert this on what this is. Maybe use a proper modal and say what you want to go inside this element, etc., etc. So the extension is only limited to how you can think about it. HTML won't restrict you at any place, right? And since there is a one-to-one mapping between what you can do with the DOM and what you can do in HTML, there is no literal problem. You can extend it whatever way you want. Like there is no bound to this. There is you are not going to have come to a point where you're going to be limited by the potential of your platform because you're speaking the native platform language, and that's really cool about HTML, right? Because with HTML, for to add that, right, I only had to if I can find my code editor, which I can't, it seems. All right, okay. This is embarrassing. Wait. All right. So if I go to step 4, right, the only extension I had to do was I added a button. All right. Then I said, if these are just sanity checks, ignore those. Then I added a prompt. Then I created an element. Then I gave it appropriate heading, and then I just merged it. And also because I did that, and my wrapper writes to my file as I say, because HTML, the browser speaks what I speak. I also get this in my code, right? So you could do arbitrary elements. You could like write whatever you want to write in here, even HTML elements, just not the properties, but the HTML elements also, and maybe some JavaScript also. I'm not sure, maybe. So yeah, HTML has its own perks, and yeah, that was the end. So thank you, and